Well, Lord Purvis and Mr. Shannon, Elder Cook and Elder Phillips, and others, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real privilege for me to be here. I also want to welcome, particularly I'm aware that we have delegates from Bosnia, Central Asia, Israel, Palestine, Iraq, Nigeria, and Sri Lanka. So welcome to that group. We have others who are here with ACWE, A Common Word Among Youth. That's our partner in the G20, the youth. It's a youth organization, but they coordinate everything that we do with youth people. It's just a real privilege to be here. We have our pop-up for the G20 Interfaith 20, and I just want to say a word at the outset. One of the reasons that I am heavily involved in the G20 is that it provides a forum in which religious leaders and others, religious actors, can speak to some of the great policy issues of our time. And I think this is really a very important thing. I'll say a word at the beginning just about the importance of this in terms of how it's connected with religious freedom, because the G20 has a focus primarily on economic issues. It emerged as part of the solution to the economic crash in 2008. But over the past decade, it's become very common for the leadership of the G20, each host country, to look at issues that relate to the Sustainable Development Goals that have been adopted by the United Nations. And I'm not going to go into those, but those of you who are aware of this are conscious that these are issues that have been, these are goals that really can't be achieved or optimized or achieved optimally without the input from religion, because these are areas, poverty, health, education, women's issues, environment, so many other issues where religion really makes a difference. And I think in our world, too often people don't understand or appreciate the significance of religious freedom because they don't understand all that religion does. And so there's a kind of two-step structure to the work I'm engaged with the G20, and that is, step one is work on these core areas where we're dealing and trying to get the major countries on earth to really pay attention to the vulnerable, those in need. And that requires partnership with the religious sector, and that partnership doesn't work if there isn't freedom of religion or belief. So today I want to advance 7 reasons for thinking freedom of religion or belief is foundational for all the other work. It's historically foundational, philosophically foundational, institutionally foundational, and empirically foundational. It's also instrumentally foundational, and it's the best tool we have for forging peace in a highly pluralistic world. And it's also intrinsically foundational because it protects the core of human dignity. Finally, it's foundational in being a criterion for justice. So let me provide a thumbnail sketch on each of these points. Freedom of religion or belief is the oldest of the internationally protected human rights. Historically, it's the grandparent of many of the other fundamental rights in the modern human rights pantheon. It emerged from the crucible of the wars of religion at the dawn of modernity, and at the beginning of the Republic in the United States, it was still an experimental principle. No prior society had been explicitly built on the foundation of religious liberty. Though no longer experimental, it remains a paradoxical and counterintuitive right because it commits those who live by its precepts to recognize the rights of those who adopt different and even radically opposed worldviews. But it has emerged as the most powerful tool we have for organizing and stabilizing genuinely pluralistic societies. Our other fundamental rights, freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom from discrimination, and ultimately freedom from want and fear, are ultimately based on this principle. In brief, freedom of religion or belief is historically foundational, and we neglect it at our peril. The right to freedom of religion or belief is philosophically foundational because it protects the comprehensive belief systems and worldviews in which our other ideas are rooted and from which they derive their meaning. For much of human history, it was assumed that social peace depended on social homogeneity. This often remains an unstated assumption of security policies, where the assumption is that the phenomenon of violence perpetrated in the name of religion is a consequence of diversity and that the solution is to coerce uniformity and conformity. Because religious differences are deep and non-negotiable, they lead to intractable conflicts that have littered the pages of history. While there is some truth to this view of things, recent scholarship suggests that this picture overstates the dark side of religion. Close analysis of conflicts that involve religious actors often demonstrates that it is not religion itself that causes the conflicts, but a variety of other factors. This is not to claim that religion is never responsible for violence and conflict. It is simply a reminder that great care should be taken in attributing blame. In fact, far from unleashing the destructive impulses of conflicting religions, freedom of religion or belief helps tame the centripetal forces of pluralistic difference. The philosopher John Locke helped us to recognize that the real source of violence perpetrated in the name of religion is not religious difference itself, but defensive conduct when conscientious convictions are threatened by the efforts to coerce social monism. Based on 2.5 centuries of evidence, we know that the once experimental social framework derived from Lockean theory is eminently workable and in fact can support social stability and peace in a much wider range of contexts than Locke himself originally thought. It is not cultural homogeneity that is critical, and not even tolerance as Locke understood it, but a much narrower pluralistic commitment that can be articulated as follows. What really matters is whether each, on sound internal grounds, supports the public doctrine of the equal inherent dignity and inalienable freedom of all human beings, irrespective of their religion, life stance, or any other differences, and that each reasonably understands or else trusts that others similarly support freedom of religion or belief. Note that in the end, what is really required for social peace is a shared commitment to equal human dignity, safeguarded by strong protection of freedom of religion or belief. That freedom is institutionally foundational because it protects and fosters institutions that engender the vision, the motivation, and the moral support that translate religious ideas and ideals into personal and communal practice. It often overlaps with other rights such as freedom of expression, freedom of association, rights to non-discrimination, rights to protection of an intimate or private sphere, and so forth, but its sum is greater than the individual parts. Institutions that do not implement FoRB will fail in no small part because freedom of religion or belief is vital to stabilizing peace in a free world that allows for differences of thought, conscience, and religion. Stated differently, freedom of religion or belief is empirically and instrumentally foundational. We now have extensive empirical work demonstrating strong correlations between freedom of religion or belief and countless other social goods. Proof of correlation is, of course, not the same as proof of causation, but as the volume of empirical data increases, it is becoming increasingly possible to sort out the myriad factors that point to reciprocal causal relationships between freedom of religion and the other social goods. Much work remains to be done, but there is every reason to think that the additional work will further reinforce the conclusion that freedom of religion or belief has significant causal influence on bringing about countless other social goods. This is not surprising. It's long been recognized that religious communities are tremendous sources of social capital. If this resource can be devoted to advancing other goods in ways that are quite natural for religious communities, and not expended on defending the community from persecution and discrimination, a massive peace dividend can be expected. It's worth noting in this regard that the right to freedom of religion or belief functions as a powerful filtering device. Precisely because it is not an unlimited right, the carefully crafted permissible limitations on religion help societies wrestle with the ambivalence of the sacred by allowing regulation of the darker side of religion while protecting its socially beneficial character. It's accordingly a principle of tremendous social leverage. Far from protecting sources of polarization and divisiveness, it holds the key to social stability and harmony by providing the shared assurance that everyone will be secure in following his or her own beliefs. Beyond such instrumental value, however, it's important to emphasize that in the end, freedom of religion or belief is foundational because of its profound connection to the core of human dignity. In this regard, it's important to note that dignity is not merely an alternative type of minimalist homogeneity, a convenient conceptual common denominator that can serve as the foundation for modern pluralistic societies. In particular, it's not a social bond that will unravel as a potential unifier when rival camps in modern culture wars attempt to capture the concept and attempt to exploit it in furtherance of their own ends. Dignity is a rich and generative concept with deep roots in a variety of traditions. It has a generative power in discourse that has the potential to expand vision and raise sights. It has an inherent reciprocity that encourages those on one side of a moral argument to take dignity of others seriously. Protecting dignity generates gratitude as a social byproduct, which translates into stability, reinforcing loyalty. In conclusion, freedom of religion or belief is foundational in at least 7 respects. It's historically, philosophically, institutionally, and empirically foundational. Fifth and sixth, it is not only instrumentally but intrinsically foundational. Finally, seventh, it's a vital constituent of just and stable peace in deeply pluralistic societies. In the end, it's vital to remember that a state which fails to implement this great principle cannot claim to be just and, in fact, cannot long endure. Thank you.